Chief Librarians. Are they worth using? This is Dave from Hellhammer, and that's what we're going to look at today. So today I'm going to go over the 4 Chief Librarians that have models, how they interact with the rules, and at the end we'll discuss whether they are actually worth having in your armies on a possibly competitive level. Now this is all based on me looking at stats and other people's armies, what I've seen, how they look on paper, and generally a generalisation. Now these are my own opinions, so feel free to disagree. And let's get right into it. Mephiston, Chief Librarian of Blood Angels. Comes with strength and toughness of 5, 6 wounds and 5 attacks base. 2 up armor save, and he has, through his Lord Death rule, a 5 up shrug against wounds. His weapons are a bog standard plasma pistol and a 4 sword that's times 2 strength, meaning he's running around at his strength 10. He can only take the Sanguinary Discipline, which has some great buffs or ways to turn him into a beatstick. And with his Warlord trait, if you want to go that way with him in a smaller game, it means he always fights first. So he's 140 points for this, and while it's cheap, it is very cheap, I feel that he's not a great Chief Librarian. His profile, his weapon, all read you to point him at something and hit them hard. In 9th edition, it's not really a good move. He can buff, but he's better at just running in and slapping things around with his sword. However, that is liable to get him dead and you losing the model rather quickly. Ezekiel, the Dark Angels Chief Librarian. Comes with a 2 up armor, 4 up invuln save, the Inner Circle rule, which basically gives him the transhuman physiology stratagem, which means he can't be doing anything better than a 4+ unmodified, which is really good. His bolt pistol is 2 damage, and his 4 sword gives him +2 strength. Now, like all the force weapons, it's D3 damage, but against Fallen or Heretic Astartes, that D3 damage becomes 3 damage, which is really good. And with Chaos Marines getting their codex this year, that's going to really up him a bit and make him more viable. He has a 6-inch aura that gives a +1 attack to core or characters, which does not stack with Shock Assault. So if your opponent has a way of turning off Shock Assault, or it's a combat round 2, you'll still get your +1 attack like you charged with Shock Assault. As a Chief Librarian, he also gets +1 to casting Terramancy powers, which out of the Space Marine disciplines is probably the strongest at this precise moment in time. And his Warlord trait, Stubborn Tenacity, means that if he dies, he does not remove from play as long as he doesn't explode, and he stays in play. But you can't allocate any more wounds to him, and he is removed at the end of the turn or the end of the battle, whichever's first. But he'll still be able to fight. So if he's had a fight last buff thrown on him, and he's your Warlord, and someone starts around and kills him, he stands there, and then when it's your turn to fight, you fight with him, and then you'll remove him at the end of the thing. It's quite an interesting Warlord trait. And this is all wrapped into a package of 125 points, which, for everything you're getting from this guy, is an absolute bargain. Nui Stormcaller. He's the Chief Librarian of the Space Wolves in Terminator armor, and he's armed with a bolt pistol, which Terminators don't normally have. He's got Nightwing, which is an Assault 3 lasgun that only has a 12-inch range, and his Force Staff is a +3 strength, the stave. He can only cast from the Tempestus discipline And one of his abilities, his staff lets him re-roll Deny the Witch tests. And he also, as a Chief Librarian, gets +1 to cast the Tempestus Discipline, or all his psychic tests. His Warlord trait gives him 6+ Shrug against wounds and mortal wounds. If he is the target of an attack, your opponent can't re-roll the wound roll or the damage roll. Now, this has its uses, but when there are other options for Warlord, do you really want this guy as your Warlord? If you're playing a smaller game, yes, Chief Librarian as a Warlord is a good idea. But for most games that are around the 2,000 point mark, no, he'd never be a Warlord, so it wouldn't really come into play. He's not a bad character overall. No, like all Chief Librarians, knows 3, cast 2, deny 2. He's quite good, but he just, the 140 point price tag doesn't really call out. Chief Librarian Tigiris, Ultramarines Chief Librarian. Surprisingly, only has a weapon skill ballistic skill of 3+, so you don't really want him in combat. Comes with a bolt pistol, frag and crack grenades, and his force staff is a +3 strength, -3 AP weapon. So it's got the same AP as a power sword, which is quite good. He's got the Hood of Hellfire, which allows him to add 1 to his cast or denies. And he's got Master of Prescience, which lets him pick a core unit or a character and drop a -1 to hit buff on them. So anyone shooting at that character or core unit is -1 to hit them. Has some versatility, especially with Dreadnoughts. It's really fun. So Redemptor Dreadnoughts with a -1 to hit on them. It'll play with your opponent's plans slightly. He's the only Chief Librarian who can pick from one of 2 disciplines. The Librarius Discipline out of the Codex, or the Indomitus Discipline out of the Ultramarine Supplement. His Warlord trait is Master of Strategy, which lets him put a core unit into the Tactical Doctrine, which for the Ultramarines means any unit that goes into the Tactical Doctrine outside of the normal Tactical is able to move and fire without penalty. Now this all comes in at quite a reasonable 135 points. Now, as an all-round utility character, Tigiris has got it. He's good in an Ultramarines army. He really does play into it. Where you've got some Librarians are good buffers, some are good at one thing, some are good at another. He's more of a support character than a frontliner. So now that we've looked over the characters, I feel that based on statistics and rules and army interaction, I think Mephiston personally is the weakest of them all. He is basically a point and click character. Point him at summit, go and hit it. So I don't think he's as good when you can do it, in the Blood Angels especially, you can do it better with a build your own Chief Librarian with a jump pack, or a Phobos Librarian to hide in the middle near an infiltrator squad, for example, and fire off buffs to units on their way into assault. Stormcaller, he's an all-round character due to the way the Space Wolves discipline works. But again, he's good in combat, the way his chapter tactic works, and the super doctrine. But again, he can buff, but being in Terminator armor, he's really, really slow, which is a real big hindrance for him. Tigiris is a support character through and through. He's great at buffing. He brings so much to your army. Points wise, he's pretty good, but he's another giant you're not seeing a lot of, which says there's a problem there somewhere. But hands down, the best Chief Librarian is Ezekiel. He's good in combat, he's a good support character, he can do everything, as well as being the cheapest of the 4 Chief Librarians. So Ezekiel, in my honest opinion, is the best of the 4 Chief Librarians you will get models for. So, looking over the lists, I've not seen Mephiston in any Blood Angels tournament list. It's a shame because it's a lovely model and his background's amazing, but competitively he's not really there. Nui Stormcaller, I've seen in 1 or 2 Space Wolf lists that are top 4 in. So he could break in, but you need a certain build. The Ultramarines, Tigiris pops up quite a bit. Roughly 30 to 40% of Ultramarine armies are using him because of his little buffs he can give and the way his psychic discipline works for his Ultramarines. And then Ezekiel is turning up in near enough every single Dark Angels list because he's just that good. He is absolutely the best of the Chief Librarians. Now, I know it might sound biased given that I play Dark Angels, but all this is based on me looking over it rationally, how they interact, how they play, and how much they're turning up in these top 4 armies. So, in conclusion, Chief Librarian, rules-wise, the best one of the lot, hands down, is Ezekiel. Always will be, unless they change his points, or something changes with the Ultramarines. So for now, I hope you've enjoyed this. This is Hellhammer. Please like and subscribe to the channel. There's more content on the way, and it's all various subjects all related to my hobby.